bring in Ellie. She's been waiting for a while. If you're still there, Ellie, unmute
Yes,
your mic
I'm
and
I'm
introduce
here. Can you
yourself.
hear me okay?
Loud and clear. You sound great.
Okay,
Good evening.
great. So, great space, Lori and Nick. So I've been a supporter kind of from the beginning of him running as a Democrat, but I've listened to everything that you guys have said, and I think for me it's more sentimental because he reminds me of my father-in-law and my father, the kind of Democrats that they were. And my father-in-law worked on lots of campaigns, like closely on Carter's campaign and Humphrey's campaign and Mondale's campaign. But I want to say something just so I never thought I would see in my life. My husband grew up very strong Democrat family, left the Democratic Party. He's been an independent. He has not liked a candidate in years, and he loves RFK. And he's a blue collar union, has a blue collar union job, and most of his co-workers were Democrats back in the 90s. He's been part of the union for over 30 years. But a lot of them left. Some of them voted for Trump, some of them voted Libertarian. And they're all looking at RFK now. One of my husband's coworkers said, "Hey, let's get together for lunch." And it was to talk to him about RFK. My husband said, "Oh, I'm already supporting him." So
Oh, I love
for
that.
us, we are really interested in a candidate that represents a working class. And I don't think we've had it. My husband and his coworkers feel like the Democratic Party lost touch with the working class and don't really represent them anymore. Um, and RFK really does seem like that candidate that will represent the working class.
That's what he's done his entire career as an attorney.
Right. Yep.
These environmental lawsuits that he brings, those are being brought on behalf of local citizens, people. The work is often done pro bono. Bobby doesn't even get paid unless he wins, and he usually does. But he's out there fighting for the people. He's got, I think, 27 lawsuits filed right now representing the people of East Palestine, Ohio, over the train derailment and the damage done. So he's always been fighting for the working class, for the people. He has a long track record of doing exactly that.
But then I had my best friend from high school, which I maybe talked to her one or two times a year, called me, and she says, "So, who are you thinking of supporting?" She's a lifelong Republican, but she asked me who am I thinking. I'm like, well, actually, I'm supporting RFK. She said, "Oh, me too."
All
so,
right. Love it.
so the thing that I've seen that's been so amazing is to see people that I know on the left and the right supporting the same candidate. I never thought I would see that. So,
Never thought I'd see the day, Ellie. Never thought I'd see the day. And we live in such partisan times too. That's what makes it so mind-boggling to see this convergence happening. But I look at it as a good thing. I know the mainstream
oh,
media
it's
tries to
amazing.
tell us it's bad and that it's bad that conservatives support Robert Kennedy, and I'm like, it's a beautiful thing. Why is that bad? It's a
Yeah,
good thing.
we're so tired of the just how polarizing everything has become. So his heal the divide message really resonates with us.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Ellie,
Well,
I
thank you.
wanted
That's
to.
all I had. Thank you for a wonderful space.
Well, I had
Oh,
a question for you since you're a longtime Democrat. Do you
yeah.
want to see him stay in the Democratic Party, Ellie? Or
Well, I actually am an independent right now, but I liked the idea of him running as a Democrat. In my mind, I could see a path forward. I don't think Biden's going to make it, but listening to all of you tonight, I think there's good arguments for him to run as an independent.
well, I feel that when you talked about the Carter campaign, the Humphrey campaign, I mean, you're talking my language. I'm an old school Kennedy Democrat, and this party hasn't represented our values in so long that I love the idea. Maybe I'm in love with the idea, which is not the reality of running in the
Right.
Democratic Party today. But yeah, for emotional reasons and sentimental reasons, I would love to see the party restored to the Kennedy Democrats instead of the Clinton Democrats. But I'm afraid that's not the reality we're dealing with because the
Right.
Clinton Democrats still, for all intents and purposes, run the Democratic National Committee in the Democratic Party.
Absolutely, absolutely agree. Everything that he represents are the things that my father-in-law fought for in the Democratic Party for so long, which was civil liberties and anti-war and free speech. And I look at everything. My father-in-law devoted his whole life to the party. I mean, you should see my collection of Democratic political memorabilia from my father-in-law. I actually have a JFK button,
Oh,
and
I love that.
I have a button that just says Kennedy. I don't know which Kennedy it was for.
Send me a picture. If we can follow
I
each other,
will
you
dig
can
it out and I'll
DM me.
send you.
I'll send you
It's
some of my
green and kind of
collection too.
off-white. So
I
And
might
Ellie,
just
I
have
just
that
wanted to
button.
say it's great to meet you because I see you around Twitter and always love your comments.
well, I appreciate all the work that you do. Big fan.
Thank you.
Well, thank you guys. I'll put myself down so you can bring someone else up.
How wonderful to finally get to talk to you. It's nice to meet you, Ellie. We've been
Yeah,
Twitter friends for a while, so
thanks for bringing me up.
yeah, we'll have to share some pictures of our political memorabilia collections. I got
I
some
have
goodies.
a huge collection. I actually have a huge collection of both Democrat and Republican, and I even picked up some weird ones. So I have one that is Gore Obama from before the primaries. I have some
Oh,
crazy bits.
wow. I've got something you'll love, and because you're a collector, I'll send you one. Um, I published a story today, and I'm telling my story publicly for the very first time, about how 16 years ago, I was lobbying Kennedy to run for president. This was, before Obama really, he had already entered the race, but he wasn't really getting much traction early on. This was the summer of 2007. And we had a petition drive. We had incredible support. We printed up 5,000 bumper stickers that said Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for president 2008 for all the right reasons. That was our slogan, right? We wanted him to run for all the right reasons, which is still true today. So we printed up these bumper stickers. And if you go to my blog, I put a link here at the top of the space if you're curious to hear the story of how
Okay.
I tried to talk him into this run 16 years ago. But the bumper stickers are really cool. And the first 5,000, everybody loved them. And a lot of people were on board with him running even back then. So the 5,000 bumper stickers were gone in like a month. So then we printed 10,000. And those were gone very quickly too. So we printed, I think, 25,000 bumper stickers before we gave up the race because Bobby just wasn't ready to run yet. Back then, he made a pledge to his family, to himself, that he would not run for any office until his children were grown. He still had young children at home in 2008, so it wasn't the right time. And we said, we'll be with you whenever you're ready. If you want to run in 2012, 2016, 2020, whenever you get around to it, we'll be here. So we're still here. And I don't have too many of the bumper stickers left, okay? But I did hang on to a little stack. And I'm glad I did because, look, he's running for president 16 years later. And now they're rare collector's items.
No,
So
that's
for your
awesome.
collection, I will send you one. Let's get
Oh, I
together
would love that.
on
I
DM.
love kind of strange things. I actually one of the things I think that I have that I'm sure other people have it, but I have a telephone from the Democratic National Convention in Chicago in 1986.
Oh,
Yeah, I
wow.
have some odd stuff like that. So,
Oh, that's
which that
cool.
was my father-in-law's because he was there. So,
Incredible, incredible story. Well, let's get together on DM and send me your address and I'll send you a
absolutely.
bumper sticker.
Thank you. Great space.
Thank you. Thank you so
Okay.
much. And I see Jay has his hand up. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, hey Lori. I just wanted to say real quick on the topic of him leaving the Democratic Party. One positive spin on it, on the way the whole situation is played out is for anyone who was a Democrat before, kind of watching how this whole situation is kind of unraveling. I think will definitely. I'm hoping it should at least shake a few of the people who've been supporting the Democratic Party for a long time just to see the lengths they're willing to go to actually suppress democracy. So, when I think the way it's actually played out, it puts that on full display. So when he does finally either decide to, go independent or go with another party, it'll be easier to convince some of those people who would have voted for the Democrats to vote for him, because he'll kind of expose how bad the party is, that they would really push, someone like Biden, up to lose against Trump, rather than give an honest man a chance. So the way the whole thing is playing out, it could actually work out to his advantage and kind of siphoning off enough, the maximum amount of voters possible from the Democratic Party. So, I guess it's kind of a good thing they have at least floated these crazy ideas about even increasing super delegates, because the fact that they're talking about that may even make Democrats question, wait, why do we have super delegates in the first place? So hopefully it forces some change in the Democratic Party when it's all said and done too, because it's still a party that's there. So we do want that to improve if possible.
Absolutely. And, I would be remiss in this conversation if I didn't bring up the spoiler effect. If Bobby goes third party or independent, you know what the media is going to say. You know what the two parties are going to say. They're going to say that he's just a wrecker. He's a spoiler. He's just here to hand the election to Joe Biden or hand the election to Donald Trump. Each side will blame the other side. And they'll give him the Ralph Nader treatment. Just anybody who remembers the 2000 election, a lot of people are still mad at Ralph Nader to this very day, 23 years later. They still blame Ralph Nader for giving us George Bush. That's what they say. I disagree with that point of view. But Ralph Nader still gets blamed, and everyone's afraid to be the next Ralph Nader. And they said the same thing about Ross Perot back in 1992. Of course, when Perot, supposedly handed the country to Bill Clinton, they say that he was a spoiler put in the race to deprive George Bush of a second term. And so while I've still got the Ross Perot independence here, I'm going to go to you, my friend. And I wanted to ask you about what I call the Perot effect, the spoiler effect. How do you think that's going to affect Robert Kennedy if he goes independent?
Well, first of all, I want us to stop talking about it, right? Because it's not true. The media said that. And the George Herbert Walker Bush campaign said it because they were real, pissy about the fact that Ross Perot got into the race. But, after a while, once the real research was done, it was proven that Ross Perot took just as many Democrats as he did Republicans. So it really was even. It wasn't that big of a deal. But, here's the thing. Okay, people often forget Bill Clinton won in 1992 with 43% of the vote. That's huge. Ross Perot getting into that race should have shown us all that we were just sick and tired of the duopoly. And so the duopoly got together and made sure that was never going to happen again, right? Like they were never going to be challenged by somebody like Ross Perot again. In 1996, he tried it again and it wasn't as successful. But the one thing that you'll see that every state has done is they have made it hard for you to run as a third-party candidate, like a libertarian, a Green Party, a constitutionalist, a reformist, what have you. But they have still actually made it quite easy for you to run as an independent. So, Ross Perot was asked in 1991 if he was going to run for president. And he simply told the people on CNN, if you nominate me, if you get me on the ballot in all 50 states, I will run. In 3 months, he was on the ballot in all 50 states. You can't tell me that RFK will not get on the ballot if he challenges America to do the same, because I'll tell you, he'll be on the ballot, and he'll probably be on the ballot in just a month or two, quicker than Ross Perot was able to get to. But, we got to stop talking about the spoiler effect because it's bullshit. All right? If Kennedy runs and for some reason he takes votes away from Biden, well, good. Then we need to fix the elections the way that they're being run and get rid of the Electoral College.
Fascinating. Really fascinating. I just sent a speaker invite to Aaron. Aaron's been waiting a while with his hand up. Aaron Harold, if you accepted that speaker invite.
for that, hopefully you can jump on, Aaron. But just before that, here's another interesting scenario of a way this could go. Because of the Electoral College, it could be possible in a race, between Biden and Trump and Kennedy, say if they're the front runners, or even if you have a libertarian candidate who's also doing well, or Cornel West, if he's also getting a certain percent. You could have a scenario where there is no absolute majority in the Electoral College, and then that goes to the House of Representatives for the House of Representatives votes on the next president. And, that could create some really interesting scenarios. Maybe Kennedy would get the majority. Maybe he would have a plurality above, say, the Republicans and the Democrats. But the House and Representatives would have this incentive to kick it to someone else. So that's a possibility. I think an outright victory is possible, but that is a scenario. And of course, even that scenario, I think, would be beneficial, because anything that really breaks up and shakes the duopoly in this country and, helps get us to a multi-party system in this country, with ranked choice voting and proportional representation, is a good thing. So, anything that's that level of shakeup is a good thing at this point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we live in unprecedented times. We are literally seeing our former president facing a litany of charges. What is he up to? 91 counts now of all these various charges. We've never seen anything like it. He may be running his presidential campaign from behind bars for all we know. It's going to be an interesting year, and I think we're going to see unprecedented things happen in the 2024 election. I don't think this is going to be just another election. For most of my lifetime, it was always the Clintons or the Bushes. Those were our two choices. Pretty much. It seemed like it. It seemed like we were just handing the mantle of power back and forth between these two political families who were both corrupt, and these two political parties that were corrupt and filled with neocons on both sides. But at least now I do see some exciting possibilities for other options, other choices. And I think that the will of the people is with us. In fact, I think the majority out there, we know that more than half the country doesn't vote at all. I think the number's around 55% of Americans don't vote at all because they've lost all faith in the
100
system,
million
in
people.
the two parties.
Yeah.
Right. I hope
Right.
that Kennedy's the guy who will get them off the couch and back in the game and get them registered and get them to the polls to vote. If you give them, if you build it, they will come. I've always believed that. As a third party voter, almost 30 years now, I truly believe if you build it, they will come. If you give them a great candidate, you give them a great platform, something that reaches across all political lines, that's a winning message. That's a united front. And that's what could win this election by a landslide, I believe. Maybe I'm dreaming, but I believe it. So I'm going to go to Aaron. Aaron's got his hand up and he's been waiting for a while. Aaron Harold, good evening and welcome to the space. And please introduce yourself and tell us what's on your mind tonight. You'll have to hit the mic button.
Oh, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Okay,
Very
sorry.
good. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Hey, I just want to thank you guys first of all for letting me up to speak. I want to, I never thought I would get an opportunity to talk to Nick. And I just want to personally thank Nick and Jimmy Dore too, because when the lockdown was happening, you guys were a big inspiration for what I've been trying to do now. And Jimmy can get some things wrong, but he nails a lot of stuff on the head too. And when he does, it's just amazing. And Nick, when I saw what you did with the People's Party, I was so excited with Cornel West and everything. And today I'm excited too, because you have a great young man named Holden in here who is going to be a great asset for you guys. And he's very smart. And I'm very happy to see you guys hook up together. And one thing I do want to say, though, is we're all focusing on 2024. I am looking forward to 2028 because I thought it was important that Cornel West get a stage at least to get on the podium because, it would give us a difference between voting for the lesser of two evils. So I think all of us can agree probably Cornel West is a good person, right? And we can probably all agree that Trump and Biden are probably not that great people. So, and so my question to Nick is, so, you're not, in 2024 you had the Cornell West thing happen, and now that's not happening no more. Are you looking forward to 2028, and what are you going to do to get on a more national stage in 2028?
Oh, I mean, that's going to depend so much on what happens in 2024. And so we're very much looking at 2024. And what Christina Tobin was talking about with a series of independent, free, and equal debates, that's, I think, a part of it to give independent candidates a platform. Cornell West should absolutely be a part of that. Everyone deserves to be a part of that. Likewise, with the next Rage Against the War Machine, which is going to have a twist on the theme that we had that I think is very resonant with the election that we're having, and is kind of at the it's like at the cross section of what many of these different campaigns, these populist campaigns like Kennedy's and Trump's and these people who have more populist energy. It's we're going to have a theme that's very much at the intersection of that. So that's what we're really focused on here, is how can we bring down this duopoly that is destroying this country and this empire and this war machine, and we have to be creative. And I think now that, especially after Rage Against the War Machine, and especially now that we're having conversations across different political parties and ideologies in the anti-establishment, now we have so many more options available to us. We can coordinate and bring down the system in ways that weren't possible before, And so these are the kinds of things, like, for example, Bobby Kennedy potentially going independent, there potentially being a coalition around supporting him that spans left to right. So there is so much that we can do in this election, and there's so much that we have to do, because the political system in this country has deteriorated to the point where, I mean, obviously, we're in a war that is threatening to go nuclear, is, an even greater risk than even the Cuban Missile Crisis at this point, where we're at a point where, I mean, we have pandemics, and we have regularly these organizations, governments are producing bioweapons, and even as Kennedy said, they can be ethnically targeted, so there's really these horrific doomsday weapons that are being produced now by governments, particularly the United States, so there's artificial intelligence, another existential threat. So from my perspective, we don't have unlimited time. We have to make the most of this time that we have, because the existential threats to humanity as a whole and catastrophic threats are just exploding. The technology is advancing. Those threats are proliferating, whether it's the ability to engineer super viruses, as Kennedy talks about, whether it's the risk of nuclear war because of this geopolitical confrontation that's, of course, provoked by the United States, whether it is artificial intelligence either being monopolized by a small cabal of big tech corporations, or even a particular company or billionaire, or a particular government or intelligence agency. Putin said in 2007 that whoever controls AI is going to rule the world. And so, or AI, of course, just surpassing whoever attempts to control it and really wiping out humanity or taking over in some fashion. The things that sounded science fiction like that, or engineered super viruses, are now reality, that we face as a species planetary extinction level threats, multiple extinction level threats that are proliferating into more and more hands. And the more that we remain in this kind of crazed conflict-based system, both domestically and internationally, the higher the risk that our luck is gonna run out. In fact, it's really just a mathematical, statistical question. We have to stop doing these things like gain of function. Otherwise, we're gonna have something that makes COVID look like it was a tiny trial run. So really, we're very much focused on 2024 and building the People's Party, and in keeping the perspective, even beyond the People's Party itself as an organization, looking beyond that to how can we contribute as the People's Party to continuing to build these coalitions and these bonds across left and right that give us much more power and options as a working class to fight back against this tiny ruling oligarchy. And what can we do in this election that can most break the system and the duopoly and move us towards that point where we have a country of peace and prosperity and a multi-party system where different, political parties, every political party, Libertarian, Green Party, People's Party, Forward Party, can all really compete on an equal and a fair playing field, and there's so much that we can do in this election, as we're talking about right now, as this space is dedicated to, towards advancing all of those different goals. So, and then whatever is to happen in 2028 is really going to build off of the platform of whatever happens in this election. So that's where our focus is now.
Totally agree with that. Did you have any other thoughts, Aaron? Anything you wanted to share?
No, I did want to say I'm glad to see, Nick, you're in the spaces and stuff, because I think this is a great way to sniff out a lot of bad actors and bad apples. These conversations we have on here are awesome. I do some called Poor People's Politics. You're welcome on anytime. Holden and a couple of people, the speakers up here have been in some. And my thing is, I always want, we all have the same goal in the end. We want a little power coming from the top back down to the bottom. And everybody has a different way to get there, but I like to think we can all work together and maybe get some third party and independent voices in the race too,
Absolutely. I like that. And thank you for joining the space and sharing your thoughts. That was great.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. It's great to meet you. Please send me an invite. I'd be happy to join you anytime.
Oh, thanks, man. I just, like I said, you and Jimmy were a real inspiration to me during a really tough time in my life. I'm not like super fans or, I don't do the idol worship thing, but just the fact that you guys went out there and spoke the truth about a lot of stuff really resonated with me and really helped me kind of form what I'm doing right now, honestly. So
appreciate that, man.
Right on. And I hope you'll join us in spaces here too anytime, Aaron. It'd be a pleasure to have you. And I'm going to go back to Mike Kelly. He's had his hand up for a while till it hurts. Go ahead, Mike.
No worries. So some of this discussion has made me think about some things. And so I just want, maybe we'll see what you think about it. But, we talked earlier about how, Democrats, Republicans, independents, moderates, like in 2016, they voted against Hillary. And I think this year people would actively vote against Trump or Biden, as something they would go out and do energetically. And if there wasn't another choice, they might not even vote at all. They would just abstain from the vote. But if there was, like RFK, they would actively go vote for him, as happened in 2016. I think, if he did go independent and he was endorsed by, say, like several third parties, Libertarian, Green, Reform, No Labels, People's Party, Forward, stuff like that, I think that would help in that synergy of the middle in a sense. And in running independent, because RFK's roots are as a Democrat, and I think a lot of his original, roots like that, being that they would alienate those Democrats less in a way, because I think as soon as he says he's an independent, it's less of a blow than saying I'm now a libertarian or Green Party or People's Party, any, whatever. But I think that alienates less in a sense. It's just what I think, but I'd love to hear your take.
I'd like to go to Sherelle and get her take. She's had her hand up for a while too. Want to jump back in, Sherelle?
Yeah. Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to say, if he is a spoiler, it would be a spoiler for the Republicans. I think he would take way more Republican votes, especially if he ran with Tulsi. Can you imagine? Kennedy Gabbard? Yeah, she's amazing at messaging, and she knows how to speak to, they're both cross ideology appeal. But I lived with a staunch Democratic. I mean, it became a cult, the Democratic Party, and they have this list of people they're supposed to hate. Putin and Trump are at the top, but Bobby's not far below those two.
That's right. I'd say he's definitely on the top of that list now. And
yes, so he would pull a lot more Republican votes. He would be a spoiler for the Republicans. I think Ross Perot was a spoiler for the Republicans.
But the scary thing when I think about that is, oh my God, what if we end up with 4 more years of Joe Biden?
That's a scary thing. Yeah. I mean, but
Yikes.
I think he has a chance of pulling it off with Tulsi if there's no election rigging. If there's no election rigging,
Yeah, that's a
I
big
worry
if,
about
isn't it?
that. Oh, I wanted to say, Lori, people do not know about the DNC fraud lawsuit. It's not just superdelegates. It's not New Hampshire, Iowa, Georgia. It's far worse. I would love you to have Jared Beck on your show. He's the lawyer that prosecuted the DNC fraud lawsuit, and it is quite a story. I mean, 2 dead witnesses. If
That's
you can
right.
get him on, he's
Yeah.
he's kicked off of Twitter. He and his wife, but
Are they
he's
still
back on.
banned? They're still banned from Twitter,
They're
huh?
still banned, yes, but now he's AI underline Jared on Twitter. So he
Okay.
snuck back on there.
Cool.
And I've
Okay,
been
yeah.
posting like mad about that. Nobody will pay any attention. The only person I've heard cover it seriously is Sabby Sabs.
Yeah, I
She
saw
had
them with Sabby.
them on. Yeah, she had interviewed them for a long time. So I highly recommend you getting him on your show.
Yeah, I would love to. And I was told that they were kind of laying low, didn't like doing interviews much. They're still really angry, understandably, about how that suit turned out, and that it's just not a subject they like
Well,
to talk
he
about.
actually liked one of my tweets when I suggested that to somebody that they get them on their show. So I think he'd be open to it.
Great. Okay, well, I will definitely give it another try and see if I can't get in touch, because it
Yeah,
is
well,
something that not enough people know about, and they should.
yeah, Sabby has his contact, so you could go through her
Got it.
if you've
Okay.
got her contact.
Actually,
Okay,
Sabby's mad at me right now. Sabby blocked me
oh,
on Twitter
oh no,
because of RFK. Because of RFK, and it's just so sad
oh.
to see that happening.
Yeah, well, she's
Yeah,
very, it's the Israel thing, probably.
that's
Yeah.
exactly what it was.
Which
It
is
was.
almost a deal breaker for me. I just hope that Max can deprogram him if he'll ever talk with Max Blumenthal.
I don't know. The
Because
whole thing just
he
really
is
set me
I've
off.
seen him change when he gets new evidence. He does change his mind,
That's
you
right.
know. So I'm hopeful on that end.
I'd
Me
love to
too.
see that conversation happen too.
Oh boy, yep.
And apparently, apparently Bobby Kennedy told Jimmy that he would have it, but it sounded like his campaign wanted it not to
Well,
be
yeah, well
until, I don't know,
that
after
looks
the
bad.
primaries or at some point.
That looks bad because
But
it
yeah,
looks like
hopefully
he
it does
has
happen.
handlers. He has handlers. If his
I
campaign says he
agree.
can't, that's not a good look.
Well, I
I
should say
agree.
I can't speak for the campaign or for Bobby here, but it is extremely unusual. In fact, it's pretty much unheard of for a presidential candidate to debate anyone who's not also a presidential candidate. It's also highly unusual to debate a journalist. In fact, in our
Well,
profession, it's really not done. So, I mean, they said that initially this was supposed to be an interview, but
yeah, they
we
never
all
brought up
know
the
that it
word
would be
debate
a
when it
debate.
first came up. When they first came up, the word debate wasn't there. Other people put that in.
Right.
He said, "I'd love to talk with Max." So he should talk with Max. It would be good if they talked privately, not around no microphones, so we could be honest before they actually talk.
That actually might be better if they know each other. They've met privately before, always gotten along well. Max and Bobby agree on so much. I think that's probably the only issue where they really disagree. And I honestly wish that they could
Yeah.
have that conversation privately, person to person, rather than making a big internet media event out of it,
Yeah,
which is what everybody wants it to be. And
I think that would be better.
then it just becomes
Yes,
clickbait, and
right.
also, one wonders, what benefit would there be for Kennedy to do that? I can see that there'd be a lot of benefit for Max, and believe me, I love Max and have a lot of respect for him. But let's say if that interview was on his channel and it was monetized, obviously it would draw a lot of donations, and the fans would, really come in, and it would be a big media event. But what benefit is there to the candidate?
Well, because it is a deal breaker for a lot of people. And if he could shift on that, he'd pull a lot more people in. But right now, oh my God, he said horrible things. That
And the
he's got
sad
this
thing is,
mythology. This
I'm so afraid they'd give him the Jeremy Corbyn treatment if he ends up showing
yes,
any
right.
favor to
Well, you had
Palestine.
uh,
You know,
yeah, but I've been repeating over and over, accusing someone of anti-Semitism who is not anti-Semitic is just as bad as being anti-Semitic. You have to
Right.
just repeat that over and over again.
I think they're also already giving him the Jeremy Corbyn treatment.
Well, yeah,
they are.
You
They're
know,
calling him an anti-Semite.
which
Straight
is
I
up.
know
it's
it's ridiculous.
pretty insane.
It's
I
ridiculous
mean,
to
which
call him an
smear are we
anti-Semite.
doing today, guys? Are we an anti-Semite, or are we a
I
Nazi,
know.
or
It's
I
so
mean,
crazy.
yeah,
But, you
or
know,
are we a
in that
Zionist?
example,
It's such
I
despicable tactics. It's just so ugly that people would
and
use
I
that.
think there is something to be learned from that example too, because Jeremy Corbyn's approach uh, to that smear was essentially to kind of, you know, he kind of gave into it. He had these
Which was the wrong
allies.
thing to do. Wrong thing to do.
Well,
He should have
that was
said,
the
"I'm not
lesson.
anti-Semitic." Yeah.
That was
So
the
And they
lesson to
they
anyway,
did
learn.
that. They did that to my
Yeah,
friend George Galloway also.
right.
that's right. And
And
Chris
also a
Williamson.
few other people. Roger Waters. Oh my God, Bobby needs to
Yes,
apologize to Roger. And
yes.
what was that other British politician that I can't
Was it
remember his
Chris
name now.
Williamson?
Andrew Bridgen. They did the same thing to him. They keep using this horrible tactic on people, and
Right.
it's just so ugly and wrong. It needs to be just exposed. So, it's as bad as being anti-Semitic, accusing someone of it.
Right.
So just repeat that like a mantra over and over.
Mhm. Well, I'm sure that conversation with Max will happen eventually. Whether it'll be public or private, who
I hope
knows?
so.
It'll probably be however Kennedy wants to do it, because he will decide for himself what and when and how would be the best way to go about that. But I'm sure those two will speak again, and I hope when they do, it doesn't turn into an insult fest or a debate. If they can discuss it rationally and peaceably, and I
Yeah,
think it would actually be a great conversation. I just don't want to see it
me
turn
too.
into a shit show, and I don't mean that
Yeah,
in a way that that I'm saying that Kennedy would lose or Max would lose. I would rather it be a real interview, even if it's
yes.
adversarial, than a debate, because then
Yeah,
it
that's
just
why when the
becomes
word debate came up, I thought, no, that's not good.
right,
You know.
right. Yeah, I'm all
The
for the idea
reason
of an actual interview.
that I think this issue is important to follow up on is not, from my perspective, that what's being done to the Palestinian people is horrific and that it's an apartheid state, but that the consistency in the application of anti-imperialist principles that
Hmm.
extends from Palestine over to all the other wars that this country wages. And Israel has
Exactly.
been a partner in crime with the United States in the wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya. And so you've got to be able to question Israel when it comes down to it, if you're going to really dismantle the empire, take down the bases, draw down the military budget, get rid of the surveillance apparatus, because Israel doesn't want any of those things. So ultimately, any president that is going to take down that empire is going to have to be able to, say no to Israel
Hmm.
when those interests conflict. And
Exactly.
that's why it's important to have the discussion, I think.
Yep.
I know that Jay Scott has some thoughts on that, because we talked about it last night on Strange Bedfellows. So, Jay, I see you have your hand up. Why don't you chime in there?
Yeah, well, yeah, as far as what I wanted to speak about, really quick, if I could just go back to the spoiler conversation. I think one thing people don't really consider is the fact that whenever the establishment brings up the whole spoiler conversation, uh they always leave out the fact that there's a huge chunk of people who don't vote. And if you ask that chunk of people why they don't vote, usually the answer you get is that the government is real corrupt And because it's so corrupt, it doesn't make any sense to waste your time voting. So the reason why RFK is, perfectly positioned to actually capture some of those people is just because of what people have been pointing out before, on the call about his, record as a lawyer, suing the government and fighting for people and winning against companies we all know are a problem, like Monsanto, and the, drug industry. So the fact that, people want to call him a spoiler when the truth is he's actually he has the best chance of bringing in people who are disenfranchised, even when you take it as far back, as his family history, because a lot of people rightfully believe he was probably assassinated, or his father and his uncle were likely assassinated for fighting the same corruption that he can credibly fight because of his record. And when you contrast that to the other options, like, Vivek Ramaswamy, who's surging right now, who has I don't know, like a more questionable history. I don't want to, I know Lori said this podcast is supposed to be positive, but yeah. So long story short, he has the history to actually inspire confidence, to like bring out some of those disenfranchised voters. So I do think, that whole spoiler conversation shouldn't even really be, a worry. And whether it's, independent or as the lead candidate for a party, I just think now is the right time for a surge like this to happen. So, but sorry, what was that? The last thing you wanted me to comment on, Lori?
It's getting late. I think I forgot. I'm getting loopy at this hour. I when we started the space, I was like, okay, this time we're only going to go for 2 hours. We're not going to go 6.5. But look at us. We've already gone like 4.5, working on 5 hours. This has been another marathon,
Yeah.
but it's just so damned interesting, and I love talking to you guys. And I noticed that our Perot Independent has his hand up, and I'm sure he wants to respond to what Jay just said. So I'm going to go back to you, Perot.
So no, actually, I've actually been thinking if Kennedy was to run as a third party, he might want to look at this no labels thing that's going on, because they've been able to raise $70 million and get on 10 state ballots already, and it looks like they're getting on 16 more. So it might be helpful to actually have, be on the ballot with somebody that has money that can help you get your message out there. And let's be real, we need Kennedy's message more than anything right now.
That's a really interesting idea. That hadn't even crossed my mind, to be honest with you. But I'm curious about it. I don't know enough, I have to admit, about the no labels movement. But the fundraising that they've done, yeah, it's really impressive. So I need to educate myself a little bit more about that. That's also another intriguing alternative that I hadn't even considered yet. And
Yeah, I just found it fascinating. They raised $70 million in like 3 months.
And do you think that they did that to get Joe Manchin to run?
So from the people that I'm talking to, they're not really interested in Joe Manchin being on the top of their ticket. From what I'm hearing, it's going to be Larry Hogan, and they're really trying to go hard after Tulsi Gabbard to be a VP candidate.
Oh, wow.
That's so interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought that Tulsi would be someone they'd be interested in, because
So she just did, actually, if you go on, she was just on Fox News, and they pressed her about this, Sean Hannity. And he asked her, like, are you talking to them? Are you talking to them? And she's like, I'm not talking to them, not being real coy. And they asked her, like, plain out, if they offered you something, would you do it? And she said, yeah, I would absolutely consider it.
Yeah, I've seen her say
Wow.
she would consider it before. I'm kind of surprised that they would consider her, because No Labels is essentially an AstroTurf big money group.
So I think that's the
It's
myth of
from a
No
bunch of big
Labels.
donors.
So No Labels was actually created by Joe Lieberman, and if anybody knows Joe Lieberman, he's one of the biggest independents that was ever out there. Huge on Israel, by the way, so Kennedy would fit in really well with No Labels. But I think that's a myth that was painted by the duopoly, because they're really pissed off that a bunch of their people have decided to branch off and create their own thing. So you're getting both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party going hard after no labels, but they're getting a lot of media attention. And so I think that's really exciting. Again, I don't know much about them other than, the backdoor talks that I have with some of the people that help manage their campaign. But I'm interested, and I would like to see, them go after Kennedy and Gabbard, because I think Kennedy Gabbard 2024 would be the greatest ticket ever.
Oh, yeah, that's my dream ticket right there. I would love to see Bobby and Tulsi team up. I know that they're friends, and on the issues, they seem to be, as far as I can tell, like 95%, even 100% in agreement on the issues, which makes them a great ticket. And a lot of people want Tulsi to run. I supported Tulsi back in 2020. I wanted to run too, and I was hoping she would until Bobby got in the race, right? And then, of course, I had to support Bobby, right? Because I've been trying to get him to run since 2007. So this is the moment I've been waiting for. So, yeah, I couldn't think of a better ticket than Bobby and Tulsi together. And it's hard to imagine Tulsi entering the race at this point, because I don't think she wants to run against Bobby. Why would she challenge him if they agree on pretty much every issue? That would pretty much negate her reason to run. And it's hard to imagine her running against him, but imagine how powerful it would be if she ran with him. And yeah, to me, they would just be the perfect ticket. And I see that my friend Alex has had his hand up for quite some time, so I want to bring him in. Good to see you, Alex. I know you've been a regular on these Twitter Spaces since the very first
thank you.
that we held back on April 18th of this year. At the very start of the campaign, you were there on the ground from day one, and I thank you for that. And thank you for coming back to the space tonight. Welcome.
Thank you. So I understand RFK Jr. is afraid of Democrats accusing him of splitting the vote. But first of all, RFK Jr., and this is not a negative, this is a big positive about him. But RFK Jr. needs to realize that, like, most of the people who are going to vote for him in the Democratic primaries are probably people who are never, in 95% of cases, are never going to vote Democrat again afterwards. And two, there are more people I know who are not going to vote RFK Jr. because he's a Democrat than far more people who are like that, than people who are Democrats who would vote for RFK Jr., but only because he's a Democrat and for no other reason. Like, the diehard Democrats they're going to choose Biden or Kamala or whoever the nominee is, and they're not going to support anyone else. Even with Bernie, this is a big problem, because when Hillary got nominated, like, he had the whole Bernie or bust thing, but Bernie himself was like afraid of pissing off these liberals. So he basically tried to silence those people. And what I'm trying to say is that RFK Jr., he literally just went on Fox News to say, like, the primary's rigged. If the primary's rigged and you know you're not going to win, just become an independent right now. Because if you become an independent right now, you're going to show up on the ballot. You're going to show up on the ballot in the general elections. And, like, the whole point of running is that you eventually show up on the ballot in the general elections, right? And even if you, like, spoil Biden, like, first of all, honestly, I'd rather have Trump win than Biden at this point. And second, if it's just down to those two. And second, from the standpoint of a third party, if Trump and Biden are your only choices, then, like, why does it even matter if he runs as a third party? Like, most people don't want those choices, and they'd be happy to vote. Like, it doesn't matter who it is. If it's RFK Jr., if it's the Libertarian candidate, I guarantee you, like, despite all of Cornel West's fuck-ups, he's still going to get a considerable vote definitely compared to Howie Hawkins. But, like, even compared to the Green Party historically, he's probably going to have one of the higher, or if not the highest, like, Green Party presidential results in their history, because people are done with the two-party system. You're seeing it right now. I guarantee you Cornel West is going to do really well electorally despite his fuck-ups. And I think the Libertarian Party is going to do better than ever this year. So I think this year is a good year for third parties. RFK Jr., he needs to leave the Democratic Party, and he needs to try to get all those people to leave with him. The Democratic Party, you're not going to break the duopoly. unless you get someone famous like RFK Jr. to split the party and then bring all those people with him, right? So I think splitting the duopoly as much as possible from both sides needs to be the top priority. And then on top of that, as far as the People's Party is concerned, man, Nick, I respect you, Nick. I hate how all these leftists, they fucked you over. You were trying to build something real, right? Like, you were trying to build a party on the left that wasn't like about intersectionalism, that wasn't about identity politics, that wasn't about like the new left. There used to be there was a party that the communists, they didn't ran on this party, but they supported it back in 1948. There was a guy named Henry Wallace who was the vice presidential candidate of FDR, but the Democratic Party screwed with his nomination. But Henry Wallace ran as a presidential candidate for the Progressive Party in 1948, and he won like 2 or 3% of the vote. And he actually split the vote from Harry Truman to I think it was Eisenhower. I think it was Eisenhower. But the point is that the point I'm trying to get at is that the People's Party, they're trying to do something that's never been done in so many decades, which is a populist left party, a genuine, like populist in the genuine sense of the word. And I'm sorry, I'm so sad that these leftists, like I'm not going to name names, but Nick, you already know who I'm referring to. You already know the people who caused this to happen. You know their names, and you know what their involvement is with the movement. But all these people unfairly attacked you, they smeared you, and they did all these things. And the fact that Cornel West like dropped his People's Party affiliation, that tells me that when pressure really ramps up, he might even drop out of the race altogether. Because he's afraid of losing his friends in academia. He's afraid of losing his friends in the movement. Because Cornel West he's used to being like he's from academia, so he's used to being like a friend of the left, of everyone on the left ever. So he's not used to getting this sort of hate. He's never gotten that. So I'm pretty sure he's stressing out every day over like what to do next. He's never done a political campaign like this before. So on one hand, I can't blame him, but on the other hand, I'm really upset with the direction that the Green Party is taking this. And I think they're intentionally sabotaging it, to be quite frank. But yeah, I'll let you speak.
Well, I appreciate that. I don't think that can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, you're good. Go ahead, Nick.
Okay, great. It's difficult to say, with the Green Party. I know that Jimmy thinks they're controlled opposition, or whether they're just really, really incapable. They're kind of from a different time. They're from the 80s and the 90s, and they don't have, the kind of populist viewpoint that we do. And, they don't have those commitments to working along class lines, which we think is the most important thing. Because it's just, it's not left versus right. It's top versus down. And, to what you're saying about, these other podcasters or whatnot that attack us, it's so shallow and transparently political when they do that. It's so clear, they try to take up one excuse or the other, but it's so clear that they just don't like our politics. They don't like the fact that we work across ideological lines. They don't like the fact that we, organize Rage Against the War Machine. The kind of more identity politics left, the thing that they were most upset about with Rage Against the War Machine was the fact that it worked, because there was another rally hosted by kind of, the more traditional anti-war movement.
Yeah,
I'm glad
PSL
they did something.
Answer.
Right. And they weren't doing anything up until the point that we organized Rage Against the War Machine. So I'm glad we spurred them into doing something. But still, we brought together a lot more people on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, who marched to the White House with Rage Against the War Machine. And, I think it's the fact that we showed that our theory of change, that when you really bring people together, as opposed to, all of the different kind of, purity tests and the canceling, if you bring people together around one issue doesn't mean you have to agree on everything else to get things done, then that can really be successful. So I'm a big believer that, like Caleb said, if you heard him a little while ago, that really you can judge people by what they're doing, and I will stand by our record at the People's Party any day, as Caleb said, so I'm very proud, and it's of course everybody who works with us at the People's Party, we're not nearly as big as the Libertarian Party, and I see Dave here on the LNC. He's a great guy. But I like to think that we get a lot done. I like to think that we get a lot done, and that that organizing is ultimately what's going to change things.
I
So
agree.
Yeah.
And it's funny because one thing I want to bring up to you when you mentioned the Rage Against the War Machine, you mentioned that that PSL like counter event that happened a month after the March 18th event. 1 second. Okay, I'm back. So I
Okay,
was
I
going
thought
to
we
say
lost you. Go ahead.
the Answer Coalition event that happened on March 18th. A few things. First of all, listen to the speeches of the February 19th event. Then listen to the speeches of the March 18th event. The February 19th event, first of all, the actual names of the speakers were people that people knew, like Ron Paul, like Dennis Kucinich, right? And meanwhile, the PSL event, first of all, a lot more organizations sponsored that one than but like obviously the Rage Against the War Machine had a paid, like you actually had to pay to be an endorser. So obviously that contributed. And also like half the left boycotted it was the other thing. But the fact is, even though there were more organizations sponsoring it, these organizations that sponsored the PSL rally were way smaller in terms of membership size, in terms of their base. These were all, Dan Kovalik, a good friend of mine, his description of the rally was as follows: 20 different Trotskyite sects handing out newspapers to each other. That was the PSL rally. 20 different Marxist groups handing out newspapers to each other. And
That's
no
funny.
one, I went to the event in DC. I never went to the March 18th event, but I went to the Rage Against the War Machine. And what was special, look, I've been on the left for years, and I've been in the anti-war movement for years. But there was something I noticed about that rally that I never saw at any other rally I've ever been to ever, which is the first anti-war rally, possibly the first rally period I've gone to in my life where it wasn't just people on the left. And there were like half the people there had never gone to a rally before in their life of any kind. So it was a good learning experience. And I feel like it actually, that one day was the most productive day for the anti-war movement, possibly since Obama got elected. Because the famous saying, Obama killed the anti-war movement, because all the protests stopped after he got elected against the Iraq War. But what I'm going to say is that we have this whole Humanity for Peace thing we just had. There's probably going to be even bigger things in the future. And we actually continued after Rage Against the War Machine. Nick, do you know who UNAC are? United National Anti-War Coalition. Remember them?
Yep.
Like this is before, they were a thing before Rage Against the War Machine. Did you know that they never did a single event of any kind after March 18th? They do like a webinar here or there, a fucking webinar. They've never done a single national day of action since March 18th. And they used to do all sorts of national days of action every month or so. And ever since Rage Against the War Machine, that demoralized so many of them. I remember going into the Facebook group of the UNAC, and I'm not even kidding. One of the posts there was literally saying, like, don't waste your time with the anti-war movement. Go find a different hobby like bowling or whatever. And in the post, it literally said, like, the Rage Against the War Machine people got the actual, like, base of people. So at this point, if you reject working with them, like, you may as well just find a different hobby. Like, and that was in their group, like, official Facebook. And so,
I'm
like,
so
it
sorry,
basically
Alex.
did defeat.
I have
Go
to
ahead.
interrupt you. I'm sorry, Alex. I have to interrupt you because we have some breaking news coming in.
Go ahead.
Right now. I will try to get back to you if I can, but this is pretty big news. While we were talking here tonight, I just posted this to the Nest up here at the top, and this was just brought to my attention. Compton J says, I am officially out of supporting Cornel West. He's done. And the reason is because apparently Dr. Jill Stein is out as West's campaign manager, and Peter Dow is in.
Who's Peter Dow?
Nick, perhaps you'd like to explain.
Well, I don't know as much about Peter Dow's kind of skills, but Peter Dow was the campaign manager for Marianne Williamson. He was also a big, Clintonite kind of advisor and strategist who was super harsh against Bernie Sanders, very much against the Bernie campaign. But then he kind of had a change of heart, and he's kind of come over more to the left in the last 3 or so years. So this will be very interesting. It'll be very interesting to see if he can turn it around. I'm not holding my breath personally. I think Jill Stein is a good speaker, but she was not up to that job of managing that campaign. That was just patently clear to me. Having actually transitioned it and worked with her and transitioning the campaign to her. So, I wish them the best, but one of the things to what you were saying, Alex, was one of the differences between us at the People's Party and the Green Party is that too often it feels like the Green Party just kind of is there every 4 years doing elections, and they kind of disappear from the scene between that. And, we as the People's Party have this theory of change that is grounded in how change has happened in the past. That is that, you've got the electoral track. We work on creating the party, getting ballot access, running candidates, like we did with Cornel West. But at least as important, we also have a direct action track, direct organizing. And so that's why we're doing Rage Against the War Machine. That's why we, Forced the Vote was a partnership with us and Jimmy and, some others jumped on. And it was so interesting because, like you were describing, like the traditional anti-war movement, these kind of, groups that had protested the Iraq War or even the Vietnam War, like Caleb said, that were still around, that weren't really organizing against the Ukraine war, that didn't so much participate in Rage Against the War Machine. It was the exact same dynamic when we did Force the Vote for Medicare for All. It was all this kind of, traditional single payer groups that have existed, like the nonprofit organizations. They didn't support that either. And that was the biggest opportunity that we had to advance Medicare for All. So that was really interesting to see that kind of dynamic playing out of, those traditional actors and nonprofits not jumping into either one. But, in addition to that, we've done direct actions against the eviction moratorium when that was going to be lifted, the expansion of unemployment insurance when that was going to be lifted during COVID as well, which was, that was the lifeline for so many different people. So we're constantly trying to do actions to abolish NATO, Humanity for Peace, which we helped out with. We really believe that goes hand in hand with building a political party. And that's, I think, another one of the differences between us and the Green Party. This is interesting news. Yeah.
I think, it's funny. First of all, there have been like at least 3 or 4 left-wing parties in American history that have ran for president called the People's Party. Like there was one back in 1971, and even there was one back in like 1890s that was like a progressive populist party. That was big back then.
They came close to replacing the Democrat Party, actually. The one in the 1890s was also a populist party, primarily sought monetary reform. And, Williams Jennings Bryan's, unfortunately, their candidate, rejoined the Democratic Party, and that's what ultimately destroyed it. But they were close to doing what the Republican Party did to the Whigs and replacing a major party.
And honestly, if, I hope we don't make that same mistake that the original People's Party did in that regard. But no, the other thing I wanted to bring up while I'm here is that there's an event happening in October 27th, October 28th in Italy. Now that we're on the topic of anti-war stuff, it's called the International Peace Conference. The website is internationalpeaceconference.org. And it is an event being held by various populist and anti-war and left-wing parties and organizations across Europe, the United States, Middle East, etc. There will be people coming from who are MEPs of different parties in Europe, and it's about the Russia-Ukraine stuff, obviously. And I wanted to bring this to your attention, Nick, because I think we want you to participate. Look, you know who the PC USA are, right? That's the group I'm a part of.
Mm-hmm.
So you know who Halali is, right?
Yep.
Yeah, me and him are going to that event in Rome. But I think I'm bringing this up because, one, if there are any European listeners, you should probably look at attending this. And two, for the American anyone here who's part of any American organization, you should look into sponsoring this. And it'll be an incredible long list of speakers. Like I said, there will be even be an MEP from Die Linke there. And you know Die Linke is about to have a split, right? Over the Ukraine issue.
Yeah, I hope that Sarah Wagenknecht starts a new party already. I was hoping she would do it after the German, after the massive 50,000 rally she hosted. Yeah.
Didn't they have like their sister
during the anniversary of the Ukraine war?
Didn't they have like a sister Rage Against the War Machine or Humanity?
They did. It was the biggest in the world. They had the biggest anti-war protests in the world. Yeah, 50,000 people at Brandenburger Tor in Berlin.
It's crazy that they can have a sister rally that's like at least 10 plus times the size of the original.
Yeah. And we didn't collaborate that closely across it, but you know, what was really interesting and telling was that she approached the organizing in the same way that we did, as opposed to the way the traditional anti-war movement over there was. And that was, she approached it as, let's bring together left and right, let's work across the political spectrum. No to NATO with George Galloway did the same thing in the UK, you know, and all of those events were more successful than the groups that said, you know, we want to be siloed, especially kind of, you know, the more woke left groups in the United States and in Germany and in the UK that were saying, no, we only want to organize with the people that we've always organized with. We don't want to let anybody else in, you know. So I think it really boosts that theory of change across the board.
Yeah, by the way,
I want to hand it back to Lori though, because I know there's a bunch of people.
Yeah, but check your DMs, Nick.
Cool. I'm so sorry, guys. I'm going to bring this space to a close. Going to start winding it down. We've just hit the 5-hour mark, and Nick Brana has been a real champ to stick with us through the whole 5 hours. And I want to give Holden the last word because I see he's got his hand up real quick, and then I'll give some closing remarks and we'll call it a night. So Holden, go ahead real quick.
Thanks so much, Lori. Thank you to you and Nick for hosting. This has been a fantastic space. I'll make it quick just on that last point. You know, so much respect for you guys putting together that Rage Against the War machine rally. You know, that it's more, that kind of thing is more successful than what, you know, alternative parties has been doing for decades, you know, just focusing on that electoral, you know, win campaigns and stuff, trying to win elections. But that energy, I have so much respect for that, and I really hope to be a part of it next year. So I'll just close out with that. Thank you all for hosting the space. This has been fantastic, and yeah, I'm looking forward to next year, and I hope, you know, Kennedy will ultimately go the independent or People's Party route. You know, whatever works best for that. I hope that he can kind of spearhead this, you know, populist movement that's coming up, because this populist energy is what will heal the divide, right? Like, that's what will get so many of these non-voters out to vote. And then, you know, the spoiler effect doesn't apply anymore if you're getting these 100 million non-voters out who, you know, would never show up to vote unless there's a candidate who's just out there calling out the corruption and saying, you know, this is why your life hasn't changed from Obama to Trump to Biden. Under all these, you know, different presidents, nothing changes. that's the most powerful thing that I think can overcome the spoiler effect that we've been talking about too. So thank you guys so much for hosting this fantastic space.
Thank you, Holden. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Johnny. Thank you, Sherelle. Thank you, Aaron. Thanks to everyone who came out tonight, Caleb and Christina, everyone who participated in this space. Our Kennedy campaign staffer friend, Anita Stewart, was here, but she had to call it a night early because she's getting up super duper early in the morning to participate in the September 11th National Day of Service and Remembrance. She has an event going down there in her area. I was hoping to bring her on to tell us about her event in Florida. She's in the Tampa area, but I'm afraid she just couldn't hang in there that late and had to go to bed. And Nick, I wanted to thank you so much for co-hosting this space with me tonight. It's always a pleasure talking to you. It's a pleasure working with you. And I hope that, Bobby Kennedy will find the time to listen to this space when he's got, 5 hours to spare. I don't know if he's ever got 5 hours to spare. He's so busy these days. But, if he listens to some of it, I hope we will forward the poll to him. I wanted to remind everybody to please vote in the poll that I have pinned to the top of this space, asking which party should Robert Kennedy run in. And your choices are Democrat, Republican, Independent, no party affiliation or third party. And that poll is going to be open for a few more days. So I hope that you'll share it because we're really trying to make this fair and collect votes from all across the political spectrum and get the widest sample possible. And those final results are going to go to Mr. Kennedy. And I hope that he will, I'm sure he will. He'll give it due consideration. Everything that we've said tonight, every pitch that was made for everybody's party, whether it's the Forward Party, the People's Party, the Libertarian Party, the Green Party, the Democratic Party, the Republican Party. I know that and just no party at all. And it seems like the majority of people want him to run with no party affiliation at all. It's amazing times that we live in. And the most amazing thing about this space tonight and all the spaces that I've hosted since literally day one of this campaign, back on April 18th is when I hosted the first of these Twitter spaces about Robert. It's so interesting to me that almost without exception, every space we do, there's never any Democrats here. If they're here, they don't ever speak up.
Do they still exist?
Where are they? He's running in the Democratic Party, so where are the Democrats? It's just interesting to me that I'm not seeing that groundswell of support. Like I say, I've talked to probably thousands of his supporters over the last 5 months. They're not Democrats. They're independents. They are progressives. They are libertarians. They're Republicans. They're everybody but Democrats. And the people that should be supporting him and the party he's running in, it's the damnedest thing, guys. It's hard to figure out. But every time I do these spaces, and just judging by the people who follow me on Twitter, who interact with me about Kennedy stuff on my podcasts and on Maverick News, they aren't Democrats at all. And maybe there are some registered Democrats. I talk to a lot of people. Most of them are former Democrats, right? Once upon a time, they were Democrats, but they're not anymore. And they're quick to tell you that, too. They're like, oh, no, I left the Democratic Party. I'm an independent now. So one thing I wanted to say, I wanted to remind everybody, since this was such a long space, we went more than 5 hours tonight. If you want to go back and check out what you missed, this space was recorded. And you can go back to the very beginning and you can listen right here on Twitter Spaces. You can share this space. I hope that you will share it with anyone you know who's interested in Bobby Kennedy's campaign. And I will, in the next few days, I will take that recording and I'll kind of turn it into a nice podcast. This will be episode 9 of the Kennedy Americans podcast, and maybe episode 10, because it was such a long space. I'll probably break it up into 2 separate episodes to make it a little bit easier for people to listen to. It's maybe make that in more digestible, shorter bits. But we'll get it all out there. And I want to thank everybody for lending their voice to this extremely important conversation tonight, because it's decision time for the Kennedy campaign and for Robert Kennedy to decide what the path forward is going to look like. And of course, a lot of that is going to have to do with what the DNC chooses to do with these new proposed rule changes coming up this Thursday, the 14th. So we're all going to be keeping an eye on that. And you can bet that I'll be keeping you updated. So please do follow me on Twitter. I'll keep you posted on what happens on Maverick News. And you can bet we will be talking about it. So many exciting things going on. And to close out the night, since it's now after midnight on the East Coast and in New York City and in Washington, D.C., where Nick is, it is now September the 11th. And for those of us who are old enough to remember, it's certainly a day that we can never, ever forget. Bobby Kennedy's a New Yorker. He was living in New York when that happened. He lived in White Plains or Bedford, right outside New York City. And I know that event affected him profoundly. And this September 11th, he is putting out a call to service. It's a National Day of Service and Remembrance. And he's asking the same question to you that his uncle posed in his 1961 inaugural address. What can we do for our country? What can we do on this National Day of Service just to make America a better place? And some closing thoughts. Me personally, what I'm doing, I've been reflecting a lot on Mr. Kennedy's challenge. I've been taking inventory of what I have done for my country over my lifetime. And I'm 54 years old now, so I've had a long lifetime of service to my country. As a journalist, I feel that being a journalist is a public service to the public. That's why I don't ask for money. I don't monetize. If people want to donate, toss a few bucks my way, I do appreciate it very much, because your donations are what keeps me going and what keeps these spaces going and clears 5 hours of my time on a Sunday night to sit down and do this. So I appreciate that. But it's not about the money. It's about the public service. That's what journalism should be. We shouldn't be in this for clicks and likes and attention and, hey, everybody, look at me. Our job is to, it's just like my hero, David Brinkley, the reason I got into journalism in the first place. He said in an interview, I've been rereading his memoirs the last couple of weeks. I love David. And he said, as journalists, we've forgotten what our job is. Our job is not to love a candidate or a president or a politician. It's not to hate them. It's just to tell you what happened. That's literally our job. Our job really isn't to give you our opinions. That's the way that I was trained. That's the way that David Brinkley was trained in those years before the Fairness Doctrine was abolished by President Reagan. Our job was to be fair to both sides, to show no favor or hatred, and to just tell you what happened. Our job is to just give you the news and let you decide how you feel about it. So all these years that I've been a journalist, I've also been very politically active. I've worked on a lot of campaigns, and I've been trying to convince Bobby to run for many, many years. And this is what I've done. Maybe the greatest thing I've ever done for my country in my whole life was trying to convince him to run for the White House 16 years ago. I never thought that dream would come true, you guys. When he told me back in 2007 that he couldn't run until his kids were grown, that he wanted to be there as a father for them, and I understood. I kind of felt like he probably wouldn't try again, And then came the terrible tragedy of his wife's suicide in 2012. And I thought, well, that's probably it. He's probably done. And I really never expected him to do what he's doing right now. It's ironic. So when he announced his campaign this year, nobody was happier than me, and more surprised. I was very, very surprised. I didn't get a heads up that this was coming. I'm just so glad that he did. It makes me feel like all the efforts, and believe me, I worked hard 16 years ago. Just today, Bobby asked people to post what they've done for their country or what they want to do for their country tomorrow on his website. And I posted this on Kennedy24.com. I put a link to it here at the top if you want to go read it. But I wanted to tell you guys my story before we go. Back in the summer of 2007, 16 years ago last month, I started a Draft Kennedy campaign along with a few other like-minded friends to try and convince him to run. We felt that after nearly 8 years of the Bush administration and the two wars that we were fighting in Afghanistan and Iraq, we believed even then that Kennedy was the remedy that America needed. And so we had this little group and we started having weekly meetings and we set up a website to draft Kennedy. We had an online petition drive to sort of gauge support out there to see if there was a groundswell of support. Well, that petition eventually collected more than 200,000 signatures. We also printed up 10,000 bumper stickers. The first batch disappeared in a couple of months. We printed 10,000 more, and those were given away to supporters faster than we could even print the third batch. That groundswell of support was there for him even 16 years ago. And so then we felt, okay, well, let's go to Bobby and let him know what we have in mind. And at the time, I was the only professional journalist in the group. I've been doing journalism for 35 years, and they said, well, you're our spokesperson, so you do the talking. You write the letter. So I sat down and I wrote the first of what would be many letters to Mr. Kennedy, trying to convince him to enter the presidential race. And this led to an ongoing correspondence between us over the next several months. And there was this old school traditional method to our communications back and forth. Back then, Bobby was not very tech savvy at all. He didn't use a computer. He didn't do email. He didn't have a smartphone. He had a dumb phone, like a Nokia phone. Everything was typed or handwritten letters to each other, postcards. Imagine, putting a pencil to a piece of paper and putting a stamp on it and putting it in the mail. People don't do that anymore. Phone calls, mostly phone calls. Some very primitive text messages, the old phones where you had to press the key 3 times to type the letter A. That's how long ago this was. And face-to-face meetings, which looking back on all this now, it all had a really charming kind of personal touch that modern day internet politicking lacks. Now, of course, our efforts at the time to draft him did not succeed. It wasn't the right time for Bobby. He had more important priorities in his life, which was raising his family. But I think a seed was planted, and that seed is only now, 16 years later, bearing fruit. I always knew he had the right stuff to be a great candidate and to be an even better president. And that's why I'm working so hard for him now as a volunteer recruiter on the Kennedy 24 campaign. I truly believe, guys, that together we will make this dream come true. Believe me, we will. Dreams do come true, but we can't do it without your help. So for the very first time, if anybody's interested to read it, I went ahead and dug the old letter out of the file cabinet that I wrote to him 16 years ago. Back then it was personal and confidential. It's the letter I wrote to Bobby proposing that he seek this nation's highest office. And I asked him what he could do for his country. And if I did nothing else for my country in my whole life, maybe I did something good by eventually convincing Robert Kennedy to run for president. So if you'd like to read that letter, I posted a link to it at the top of this space. And I'm getting all emotional just talking about it. I feel like I'm about to cry. I got something stuck in my throat. It's a beautiful thing to see this happening. And on this September 11th, on this National Day of Service and Remembrance, I feel like I did something good for my country. And hopefully, now that he's running, if we can get him elected, I hope he can do something good for all of us, for all of you. And we all have to do this together. And the first step is today, doing something good for your country. whether it's picking up some trash by the roadside, helping to clean up a waterway, doing some environmental cleanup, taking a home-cooked meal to your elderly neighbor or your disabled neighbor, starting up a conversation with someone you've never spoken to before, any act of kindness, anything that you can do to make America a better place. Kennedy's calling to all of us in that spirit of volunteerism to do something without pay. Nobody's paying you to do it. It might be work, but as some of our best campaign volunteers will tell you, and they're here tonight, we do this because we want to, because we love it, and because we feel it's a public service. And you can read the original letter that I wrote to him 16 years ago. You can read the petition, the original petition drive from 2008. 2007, actually, is when we started the petition to bring Robert Kennedy into the race. And it gives me goosebumps now just looking at it. I hadn't looked at it in several years. And I pulled it out of the file cabinet last night and posted it as part of this September 11th National Day of Service. So I hope that you all will get involved today and do something for your country. And you did something just by joining this Twitter space tonight and taking part in the conversation and listening. And there's so much that we can all do. Everybody can do something more than just voting. I mean, obviously, we want you to vote for Kennedy, no matter which party he runs in. I will support him no matter which party he's in. And I want to thank everybody for listening tonight. I really appreciate you guys. Please do subscribe to our Rumble channel at rumble.com/Kennedy Americans. And we will have every episode of the Kennedy Americans podcast archived there for you. Past and future episodes are there. I think Twitter deletes spaces. They keep the recording here on Twitter for like 60 days, and then they delete it just to free up space on the server. So a lot of the old Twitter spaces we've done are gone now, but they're all archived over on that Rumble channel. And this one will be too. All of them will be. Also, be sure to catch Kennedy this week along the campaign trail tomorrow, or today. I keep saying tomorrow. It depends on where you are, which time zone you're in. It is September 11th on the East Coast, and he is on the East Coast. He'll be in Walpole, New Hampshire today. Wednesday, the 13th, he'll be in Rye, New Hampshire. And then this Friday, the 15th, he will be in Los Angeles at the Wilshire Theater celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. You can learn more about that and all of his upcoming events at kennedy24.com/events. And you can donate to the campaign. You can buy some cool campaign merch. As I often say, there's no better way to campaign face-to-face in the real world than wearing a Kennedy 24 t-shirt or putting a flag or a sign in your yard or slapping a bumper sticker on your car. That is a conversation starter. Total strangers will walk up to you on the street and go, "Hey, Kennedy, I kind of like him." I mean, that's how you win hearts and minds, is, as you well know, face-to-face, handshakes, hugs, making new friends, bringing new volunteers into this campaign. And you can join my team of dedicated volunteers. I've got some of the best. If you go to kennedy24.com/Lori Spencer. And guys, do stay tuned this week on Maverick News. We'll keep you posted what happens with the DNC this Thursday, September 14th, which will have everything to do with the future of this campaign and where we go from here. I promise I will keep you posted here on Twitter and on Maverick News. So once again, my thanks to Nick Brana, my co-host tonight, and to all of you who joined us, who spoke. And I do want to say a prayer for everyone who still carries the pain of what happened to us 22 years ago on September 11th, 2001. I know a lot of us out there can still feel that even after all these years. And my heart goes out to all of you. And let's keep America strong. Let's make America better than she's ever been. And I believe that Robert Kennedy can do it. And we need your help. So we will see you back here soon on Twitter Spaces and on Kennedy Americans. Thank you so much, everyone. Good night.
Thanks to everyone who joined and contributed. Thank you, Lori.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.